Hi everyone and welcome. So we've all been triggered, right? Being triggered is not something you would normally welcome or go out of your way to experience, and on the whole, if you had an event or situation coming up that you knew could possibly trigger you, you may either avoid it or put strategies in place to be able to cope. Like for instance, someone you know who always pushes your buttons is going to attend the same event as you. You may avoid going altogether or avoid them. Or, if you are scared of flying and potentially have to take a flight somewhere because there is no other way of getting there, you would probably either decide not to go or use a method of coping. And then of course there are the triggers that we aren't expecting and completely take us by surprise. Triggers make you feel an array of emotions, and they are a knee-jerk response to something that scares you, angers you, threatens you, or a response to feeling under pressure. Any of those emotions that are governed by fear, because fear is where all the heavier, denser emotions stem from. So you may be thinking, how can they help you? Well, you are only triggered by something that you ultimately haven't resolved, healed, or dealt with inside of yourself. Something that doesn't bother you isn't going to trigger you. Let's take the flying scenario. One person could be terrified of flying because they've had a bad experience or they are scared of heights. Another person who loves flying or who isn't bothered one way or the other wouldn't hesitate to fly somewhere because they aren't bothered by heights and has never had a bad experience. Let's look at another kind of a scenario. It could be that someone was bullied as a child at school, and then when they are older and say they start a new job and a work colleague begins to show signs of picking on them and bullying them in some way, this could trigger them if they hadn't been able to deal with and resolve the trauma, resulting in them feeling exactly how they felt as a child, maybe helpless and not in control. Whereas another person who hasn't had that experience as a child may be annoyed but would feel more able to stand up for themselves. Now these are just a few examples, and whatever the trigger is, you will feel one or any of those heavier, denser emotions that stem from ultimately fear. And the chances are you won't be feeling in control of the situation. Okay, so you may still be thinking, how do they help me, when all they do is to make me feel panic, anger, defensive, or fear of some description? Well, you see, it's how you look at triggers. If you only see them as something to avoid, ignore, or just manage with strategies, then those triggers will always be there in your life, because so too is the underlying fear. Whereas if you take the time to look at what and why you were triggered, or what your triggers are, you can deal with them once and for all. I like to look at them as a sign showing me or highlighting something much more than whatever I'm being triggered by at that moment. This means doing some inner work on yourself, and I'm not saying to do it right there and then when you're being triggered, unless of course you want to, but after, when you have time. But try not to leave it too long, as it will be more difficult to connect with those feelings you felt at the time. I mean, do you really want to be just coping and avoiding things that you would otherwise do? Things that you may enjoy, living your life to the fullest, instead of being held back by fear. Doing inner work is so important if you want to rid yourself of whatever you were triggered by happening again, as only by asking yourself what you were feeling at that moment and being honest with yourself, can you then delve deeper as to why. Before I had my spiritual awakening, I just accepted that triggers were a part of my life that I had to put up with. I had been programmed to believe, as we all are, that fear was real. Now I realise it's not. It's your ego or false self that has created fear to control you in order to protect you. I don't see triggers anymore as something to avoid, or the need to use different methods of coping just to manage them until the next time, as I've done a lot of inner work on myself, recognising and healing the core issues behind the trigger. So in effect, there is no next time for a lot of the triggers I had. Now, I'm not saying I'm still not triggered. I am sometimes, but now if I am, I know there's a reason behind it. And then I take the time to do the inner work. So I now only see them as helping me to overcome my fears. This can take time though, so always be kind and gentle to yourself, remembering to persevere. You will get there with perseverance, and just think of all the benefits, not fearing you are going to be triggered with something that may have been affecting you in your life for years, or knowing that if you are, you can get to work on that trigger and what lies behind it, feeling more calm in your life. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Watch my video on doing inner work, as triggers and inner work kind of go hand in hand, and leave any comments or questions on this below. I would love to hear from you. Thanks for watching. Bye for now, and blessed be.